Hey, good afternoon. I like that. That was good. So welcome to the afternoon skills session. Hope you guys are in the right place here. Before we jump into the formal programming and our speakers, I'd like to bring up to the podium a CGI U student who's been asked to tell us about some of the work that he's been involved with and some of the progress that he's made on his commitment. So I'd like Chris Woodruff to come up to the podium now. We've challenged him to summarize the work that he's been engaged with in 2 minutes. But we hope that you guys will ask him questions and share some of your work as well after the session. So I'll hand it over to Chris.
Hello. Really grateful to be here. My name is Chris Woodruff, and I am the founder of Life Raft International. We're an NGO that leverages the power of friendship to transform urban refugees' lives. The UN estimates that there are 84,900 registered refugees and an estimated 62,000 unregistered refugees in Thailand. And as they wait for asylum, these refugees frequently live in the shadows of Bangkok in fear of being picked up by local immigration police and placed in a detention center. Our volunteers in Bangkok are sometimes the only lifeline that these refugees have, and they serve as a vital link to outside help. Since CGI U last year, we have increased the total number of volunteers from 4 to around 20, and this has allowed us to reach approximately 70 refugees. Our model is for volunteers in Bangkok to develop friendships with refugee families to the point that they can vouch for them. And Life Raft International then connects these advocates or volunteers with sponsors in America. And we've been able to harness the internet as a powerful tool to actually connect these volunteers and refugees with sponsors in America using things like Skype, email, and Facebook. And over the past 6 months, we've been able to open a safe house, start a school, and help refugees in Bangkok start an informal business. So looking forward, we hope to engage groups of students who want to be a part of our work with refugee families. Specifically, this year, we aim to further advance our mission by sending volunteers into the detention center in Bangkok to help the children who are in prison there access basic foods like education, food, and clothing. Thank you all very much for having me.
All right. Chris, thanks so much again. That was fantastic. Really appreciate the update. So we are here this afternoon, and the subject for this skill session is building your team, strengthening organizational leadership and capacity. We'll hopefully have the opportunity to have a sort of open forum and a dialogue about that particular subject. And getting to that, though, we have today with us 2 speakers who can speak to some of the skills and lessons that they've learned on this particular subject. First up, we have Aaron Hurst, who's the president and founder of Taproot Foundation, and we also have Pelak, who's director of strategic partnerships at Team Rubicon. They'll be discussing some of the specific steps and tools that you can incorporate into your work, so that you can, sort of enhance the organizational leadership strategies that you're employing in your particular organization or within your commitment. So I'll hand things over to Aaron, and we'll move into a conversation with Matt after that.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome.
Where did Chris go?
No, his water bottle's still there. So, I mean, he's got to be here.
Thank you all. Excited to chat with you guys. Although I gotta say at the gate, I'm a little underimpressed with all of you. I just feel like if I were you, I would go hear Jada Pinkett Smith talk, and instead you guys came there. I had a question like your decision-making qualities. But here I am. There you go. What are you gonna do? So I'm here to talk to you guys about leadership and organizational development, and that means 1,000 things. So I'm just curious, a couple people, like, why did you pick this session over something else? Yeah, sir.
I think this is the biggest challenge when you're working with young people in like different states. I mean, living our team, being connected, and being strategic about what we're doing.
Yeah, no, sir.
Especially for a student organization where there's turnover every 4 years in leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
My team is made up of graduating senior, a junior, and a graduate. We're all going separate ways, and our commitment actually is in Africa. So that's a lot of, we have to do a lot of work on different places. So bringing our team together, knowing how to do that is very important.
When you find an uphill battle, you need to invest for all the state recruitment battle.
Yep.
This is going to be something that helps create that scene on those two potentially.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to distribute roles within the team to make it the most effective team it could be. And sometimes it's very hard to find that balance also. And like how much how you can use an individual and how much like you can use a collective and which one works best.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways from this conference that I've gotten is that ideas don't change the world, it's acting on them that does, and this is like the nuts and bolts of acting on them that I think is even more important than having great ideas.
It'd be cool if I did actually change the world.
It'd be really a lot easier.
Then if you could do that as your product and figure out how to make that happen, that would be. So that was great. I just completely changed everything I was going to talk about based on what you said. So thank you.
Me too.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think that's one of the most important lessons of leadership is to listen to the people that you're working with and not assume what it is they want or what success is for them. So I think it's very easy to go into any situation, project what you want to hear or what you want to do, end up completely missing the mark in terms of the relationship with the people you're trying to inspire to do things. So you actually, talking about this reminded me, I was going to talk about my work building the pro bono movement over the last 12 years, where we've gone from a year and a half of my credit card to being the largest nonprofit consulting firm in the world. And I think you have a lot of stories I can share with you about that, but I want to start off actually based on one of your comments on my experience as a student at the University of Michigan. Any of you Michigan folks? Nice. Represent. I love it. We got a flight tonight during the game. I'm totally pissed. Apparently they have wireless though, so I'm trying to figure it out. I taught a class in a creative writing class at a local prison when I was a student at the University of Michigan, where we took students out and went and taught at a prison. I expanded it to be 4 different sections, going to different prisons. Integrated sociology curriculum into it. I integrated behavioral dynamics into the curriculum for it. It won all kinds of awards. I won student leader on all of campus or something like that back then. It was like, oh, I was just on cloud 9. I was like, damn, I'm the shit, right? I went back like 3 years later, and the whole thing was basically like just, I mean, it's still there sort of, but it's like not much of anything. It's sort of flat. It lost its soul. I was so busy delivering the service and so busy sort of building it for that moment, I didn't think at all about sustainability of that program and how I was handing it off to the faculty, how I was handing it off to other students, how we were cultivating them. Welcome back. It's a great speech. So in my mind, like, it went from the highest level of success to what felt like to me just absolute abject failure because I had failed to have that sustainability. So I have since then changed the way I go about doing everything that I do based on that experience, including the creation of the Taproot Foundation, because I realized that it's definitely the most acute in a student setting, but this is a problem fundamentally with nonprofit and social change efforts in general, is that they tend to peter out because they don't have that forward momentum. A few things that I've learned, which also speaks to some of your comments. One is the importance of a board of directors. And it doesn't necessarily mean a board of directors in a literal sense. I mean, it's a fiduciary governing body over what you're doing. But it's about having a group of people who are deeply invested in what you're doing and are committed to carrying the torch. And it's intentionally designed in a way in which they're going to be around longer than you are. and you think about them as people who are going to be around longer than you are. And a mentor of mine once said, which I thought was great advice, is we should also actually have our own personal boards of directors. How many of you read Reid Hoffman's The Startup of You? Get that. You guys should buy it. It's good stuff. His basic premise is we're all a company of one, right? And we all have responsibility for our own success. We may do multiple things in our career, but like we're all sort of our own company, and as such, you need a board of directors. You need a group of people that you can lean on and advise you and help you be successful, and every effort needs that same thing. So that's sort of one of the key principles I share that's been absolutely critical to the success of every venture that I've been on since then. I think the second thing is to fundamentally believe in yourself. I'll tell you right now, like, I'm sure a lot of you have had people tell you that what you're doing is not possible. Whether it's the idea is not possible, you don't have time, etc. And it's, I think the difference between people who succeed and fail are the ones that believe so much in what they're doing that even when someone says no or someone says it's not possible, it makes them all the more resilient and desiring to make that change, right? How many of you have had someone say what you're doing is crazy? So those of you that had to raise your hands, awesome. Those of you that didn't raise your hands, you're not doing something crazy enough. You gotta push yourself to try things that are fundamentally beyond your comfort zone, but that you feel need to happen. The other piece that I want to share, I want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A overall, so I don't want to do too much in the preamble here. The secret to the Taproot Foundation becoming the largest nonprofit consulting firm in the world and using business professionals to do that who are volunteering their time, not getting paid to do it, came out of a class I took as an undergrad at Michigan on team dynamics, which I think continues to serve me incredibly well, which is understanding why teams behave the way they do and how to fundamentally manipulate in a positive way a team so that it actually achieves something. And what I saw with a lot of traditional volunteering and service is that it didn't fundamentally adhere to the way teams work or understanding the dynamics of teams. So one of the key pieces is there needs to be a clear objective that the team shares for what you're doing, that everyone shares and that they can say, they all can describe success more or less in the same way. Because if you describe success in different ways, they're fundamentally not going to be able to, when problems arise, they're not going to get there. I think it's actually a military thing, the whole commander's intent, which is like, you don't know what's going to happen on the battlefield, but you have to know is like, what is success, so that people can improvise on the scene. The second one is to have clearly differentiated roles. People, I don't know if there's a new term for it, but they used to call it social loafing. People know that term?
Yes.
They basically have two people who can do the same job. It creates a really bad dynamic because there isn't a fundamental accountability, and the others can start depending on each other. So it's really critical to create very differentiated roles, and ideally recruit people that are uniquely able to do that, so that they know that if they fail, the whole team falls apart. So you create that pressure. Does that make sense? That's been absolutely vital.
But isn't that dangerous though?
How so?
So if I have a team of 3 people and if he fails, we all fail, shouldn't there be a safety net for me to catch him if he fails?
Yeah.
Just so that our organization doesn't fall apart. So if he fails and he lets the whole team down, that kind of defeats the purpose of the organization and that's
So that goes to the next point. Thank you. You're right. But the way you address that is not with the team. The team can't know that there's a safety net. If the team knows there's a safety net, they're going to fall on it, right? Because stuff happens. They got a paper, they got something to do, whatever it is, right? So the key for you is to always, you have to be, recruitment is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. And you should be constantly looking for and starting to create a pipeline. So on our project, we have 5 people on our project. They each do 100 hours of service. On average, I think it's 1.2 of those people drop out of the project. So there's 2 things you can do about it. You can sort of have your project die, which is what you're describing, right? Or what you do is you can intentionally build a pipeline and know that's going to happen, predict it, and have the pipeline to fill it in. But not let the team feel like that's an option. The final thing I'll say, and I'm going to hand it over to Matt, around the service piece. I think so many of you are working with volunteers, is it is really critical when you're working on these kinds of projects to vocalize expectations and to talk about what's going to happen if things go wrong. So one of my favorite that happens with us a lot is you'll have, say, a graphic designer doing a great job. You're totally excited about the work they're doing, and then they just disappear. Can't get hold of them, can't figure out what happened, completely went AWOL. You're like, where did they go? What happened? And what we found was happening was if someone missed one deadline, they became so racked with guilt that they just disappear. They thought it would be better to just completely disappear from the earth than face you and feel scorned and embarrassed about the fact that they missed a deadline, right? Which makes sense. I mean, you can sort of put yourself in that person's shoes. Like, you're just embarrassed, right? What we found works really well is that before you start a project together, sit down and do what's called a pre-mortem. Anybody know a pre-mortem? So it's the opposite of a post-mortem. A post-mortem is what you do after something's dead to decide why it died. A pre-mortem says, okay, this will die, why, and let's fix it before it dies, right? So the idea is sit down with your team and say, we're going to fail. Why? And they make a list of the 10 reasons they're going to fail, right? Because I got too busy and I can't finish the project. All those reasons. And then as a team, talk about how you're going to address those 10 things so they don't happen, right? And in so doing, when that graphic designer then is too busy and misses a deadline, you've already talked about what to do in that situation, so they don't need to feel embarrassed. Does that make sense? So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague here, and then we'll have more time to talk more as a team. So thank you all. Sir?
All right. We can turn the projector off, or?
I had to deal with it.
All right, never mind. I'll suck it up. My name's Matt Pelak. I'm here from Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon's a nonprofit organization that takes military veterans in response to natural disasters in the U.S. and around the world. Started during the earthquake in 2010, basically just focusing on the point that veterans have valuable skills in a disaster-type setting, small unit leadership, crisis management, things of that nature. 2.5 million military veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan in the U.S. right now, and that are just growing up every day. And this is one opportunity for returning veterans to continue to serve the communities they live in and have a new mission at home. So we're kind of a hybrid model in the volunteer/NGO space because there aren't a lot of military veteran-based NGOs out there. Yeah, there are a lot of military veteran-based organizations out there. People see advertising for reward, things like that, but not a lot of organizations that actually do service. So which is one team we're kind of focusing on. And one of the unique parts of what we do is apply military leadership to the NGO world, or to the civilian world. We take that and we kind of flip it around, make it a little more palatable, and try to figure out how we can make it work while working with volunteers. We're not 100% veteran, we're about 85–90% veteran, but that's the general idea. So, how many people in here are first-line supervisors or leaders of organizations? You have your own organizations? Most people, everybody, pretty much. Awesome. All right. So, what I did for this, I wasn't exactly sure what the format was going to be, so I'm going to bore you for about 5 minutes with Squad Leader Leadership 101, twisted around for the NGO world, or at least from my perspective. Taken from the Army Ranger Handbook, which uses this format of be, know, and do. Sort of a simple format way to remember some key leadership principles. You've probably heard this stuff before in different forms, in different books. A lot of people have written about this stuff, but we try to keep it really simple. So when we talk about what to be, right? These are lessons learned from the last 3 years of my life working in an NGO and a volunteer space. I'm a fireman and an Army squad leader. I don't know a damn thing about the NGO world. I didn't before 3 years ago. So we all sort of learned this on the fly. But this is what we had in our back pockets because this is what we knew. It works pretty effectively, and it has worked pretty effectively in places like Haiti, South Sudan, during Hurricane Sandy, and other places. helping to manage volunteers on the ground, and also helping to manage our own employees within the organization, which can be a challenge sometimes. I know some people have voiced concerns about managing volunteers, and it's one of the toughest things that we have to do is manage volunteers, keep them interested, keep the volunteer quality high, and keep the volunteers on message with the intent of the organization. It's one of the hardest things that we're doing right now. We started with 600 volunteers at the beginning of 2012 and ended 2012 with 8,000. All right. So trying to manage growth like that while trying to keep the message consistent across the country. You have people representing your organization all over town, right? And you want to know that they're going to represent your organization properly. So how do we keep that message strong? It scares the hell out of me every day. You get a phone call or an email, say, hey, I ran into somebody from Team Rubicon on the street. You're like, oh, who was it? It wasn't the crazy guy with the beard, was it? And so you get a lot of people that come out of the woodwork. Folks that want to do a lot, folks that have a lot of time. Sometimes these folks that have a lot of time on their hands might not be the kind of time you want to deal with. All right, it might be too much time. They might have a hidden agenda. All right, somebody might have a political agenda that they have up their sleeve that they don't talk about initially, but then all of a sudden they're on their Facebook page representing your organization at the same time talking about politics. If you have a political-oriented organization, that's great if they're consistent. But an organization like ours, which is apolitical, it doesn't do us any favors. All right, we don't do politics, we don't do religion. All right, we just go and we help people in communities. We just keep it simple. All right. So back to this be, know, do concept. All right, when we're talking about being, what we're going to be as leaders. All right, as you know, whether you're a first-line supervisor, you're a leader of an organization, or you're just in charge of your specific discipline at your company or NGO. But most importantly, we want to make sure we're a leader with integrity. All right, we're acting with integrity. It's a simple concept. Everybody knows that. Nobody wants to be a scumbag. All right, don't be somebody who lies, cheats, and steals. And at the same time, you want to be someone who's courageous, committed, candid. All right, if you're a person, all right, if you're in charge of managing a nonprofit group or a volunteer organization, and you have a hard time telling someone the truth, or you have a hard time being candid with someone, all right, you might want to find someone that can and get them in your organization and have them be the voice. All right, if you're not going to do it, have someone that's capable of doing it, because somebody has to take the reins on that. Somebody has to be the decisive voice of the organization. If you just try to be nice to everyone and come together and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, it's not going to work. All right, somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to make hard decisions and have communication with people that sometimes aren't so good. Hopefully that's not what happens all the time, but these things do happen. And maybe most importantly, be the standard. All right, be the standard and be consistent in your organization. You are who everyone's watching, or most people are watching at least. All right, if you're not being the standard, all right, and this is coming to work on time, dress how you want everyone else to dress, things like that, but also conduct yourself as you want the rest of your organization to conduct. I know this is a super simple concept, but when things get busy and people start working 80-hour weeks, right? You start cutting corners, we start saying, nobody will notice that, nobody will notice that. Somebody notices every single time. Someone will notice. It might not be the same person every time, but I guarantee you someone will notice. Someone will notice that you got shit-faced at the party, made out with Bob, or woke up somewhere else, or you used foul language, or you came in late. Okay, these things happen. Get a question?
So, just to go back to the concept before this point, you said always make sure that you can with somebody, go find somebody else who can. What about an organization where you are working but you need also, you tend to enlist your friends? And even though they have another agenda, but they are already helping the organization now. If I was to say, you can do that, that's I'm going to be one person short of the idea. So how do I address that by saying, we cannot do this, let's close it out?
It's probably one of the hardest things that we've had to deal with. You start an organization with your friends. That's how these things roll out sometimes. Like, hey man, this is a good idea. You want to try this out? Yes, let's give it a shot. I think if you have the right relationship with the person, and you can have an adult conversation that said, hey, I really don't think that this is the right thing to do. Maybe we should try to do this. If they can't have that conversation with you, they're probably not someone that you want in the organization. Unfortunately, it's a reality. Even though they're your friend, when it comes to business, I think that can sometimes break up friendships. But it's unfortunate price that you have to pay sometimes in this space if you want things to work out. Anybody?
So which of the two would you advise on? Whether to going for your friends or going for outside?
Well, I mean, sometimes you need to have people around you that you can trust. And I don't want to get too off the top track with questions yet. Well, can you remember that? We'll come back to it. I just want to finish up really quick. So now that we got the B out of the way, all right, we're talking about what we want to make sure we know going into this or as we move through this. All right, first off, we want to make sure we know ourselves. All right, know ourselves, know what our strengths, know what our weaknesses are, and know what our limitations are. Like Dirty Harry says, a man's got to know his limitations. All right, we all have to know our limitations within the space. All right, I'm not good at math, so I don't mess with money. All right, we have an accountant for that. Like certain things, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. If you're not good at something, find that out. Don't be afraid to admit that, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Okay? I do things all the time. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make PowerPoint presentations. All right, so I'm always asking people how to make PowerPoint presentations. This is a silly example, probably because I'm old. And don't rest on your laurels. We have good days, bad days. If you're having like a really good week, don't get lazy. All right. Know what your mission is. Know your organization's mission is. All right. You run into somebody in the elevator, okay, or at CGI U, says, "Oh hey, I'm Big Bob from Big Bob's Bank. I got a couple million to spend. What's your organization do?" And at that point, you're like, well, we got this thing, and there's these kids, and you need to know what your organization's mission is, inside out and backwards. All right, be able to just drop that out, say what it is. Everyone in your organization also needs to know the same mission. Like Aaron said earlier, okay, everybody needs to be on that same page in the organization. Okay, everyone needs to know what the commander's intent is, what the intent of the organization is, but also what the mission statement is. Okay, everyone should have your mission statement memorized, but what also the no bullshit mission of the organization is. Like, tell me what you do. Like, tell me what your organization's about, and be able to deliver that consistently. And across the organization, everyone should be able to do that. Sit everyone in front of a camera when you get back and say, what is Team Rubicon? Obviously, use your own organization, but what is Team Rubicon? We did this with our people last year. Tell me what Team Rubicon is. 20 people. All right, we got 15 different answers. All right, so we realized there's a problem there. All right, so we sat everybody down, we focused on it, and everyone is more on the same page. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Okay, it sounds simple, or it sounds like it's something everyone should be able to do, but if you haven't done it, if you take that for granted, oh yeah, he knows what we're doing. Yeah, he's good. Don't take that for granted. Make sure everybody sits in the room and says it. All right. It makes things so much easier when you have a potential funder come up or a potential supporter you want to be able to knock it out of the park. Have that elevator speech now. All right. Keep working. And then along the same lines, what's the direction of the organization? All right. Well, where do you want to go with this? Where do you see yourself in a year or 5 years from now? It all built into it. All right. And lastly, you need to know your people. Okay, know who's working for you. All right, you got a bunch of people in the organization. Maybe your organization doubles in size. You got a whole bunch of volunteers. You never go spend time with the volunteers because you're always in the office, right? So you have no idea what's going on in the field. If you don't spend time in the field with your people, if you don't go out and see what your organization's actually doing, how can you make decisions on what's going to happen in that organization? You have to get out in the field. You have to know your people. You have to know if your people need something that you don't know about. Maybe you didn't know. For me, I eat a lot. All right, I'm a guy that eats a lot of food, and if I go on a job or I go on a mission, and lunchtime comes around, there's no food there. Well, man, your job is to get lunch. Somebody, whoever my boss was, didn't coordinate lunch. Right, and it sounds stupid, but You want to figure out something that's going to piss people off. Don't feed them for a meal or two. You'll see how much productivity you have. All right? Things along the same vein. Make sure you're taking care of your people. And yes, that is as simple as feeding them, or as congratulating them, or as praising people, saying, hey, Bob did a good job today. Let's recognize what Bob did. It's a really good job. All right? Does that make sense? It's more applicable in the Army, because if your first sergeant forgets to feed you, then everybody gets grumpy, and there's a big mutiny, and it's like, we didn't get fed today. All right, but it happens with us when we go to the field of disasters as well. But hey, if I came to CGI, nobody had lunch, you guys would be grumpy, right? All right. So that's the no side. And then, as far as what to do as an effective leader, we talked about a lot of it. I said before, be the example, set the example, and lead by it. Okay, lead through your example. That's a basic. All right. Accept responsibility for your actions, always. Okay. Now, a lot of this stuff we talk about, but you have to understand how important it is to have that consistency in the leadership, because people see through this. All right. People see through shoddy leadership. People see through lazy leadership so quickly. You guys have all seen it in leaders you've had, right? If you get lazy, if you become a lazy leader, you're wrong. And if you think being the boss means you have to do less work, then you're very sadly mistaken. All right? You're waking up first, you're going to bed last, you're eating dinner last, if there's any food left. All right? It's important that you understand your role as a leader, not only to manage the organization, but to take care of your people as well. All right? You can't forget to take care of your people. Keep the people that are working for you informed. I think somebody brought that up earlier over here. How do you keep everybody on the same page? Now, you have people that are in different states, people in different countries. Find different ways, whether it's a Google Doc, or a website, or weekly conference calls, or video calls, or all of the above, some agreeable solution to doing this. And don't spend 2 months talking about what a good plan would be to implement this. Pick something that works for most people. All right, it's the whole 70% solution concept. All right, the 70% solution now is better than the 100% solution that you come figure out maybe 2 months later. By that time, half your organization is left because you're not a decisive leader. Okay, so be decisive. Come up with that 70% solution, execute it, make adjustments along the way, right, and get the information out and flowing. If you don't have informed members in your organization, if I don't know what's going on in my organization, my Team Rubicon's office is in Los Angeles. I live in New York. If I don't get the information from Los Angeles and I go to an event and I didn't know what's going on, it makes me look stupid, it makes us look stupid as an organization. It's just, who wants to support an organization like that? You guys don't even talk to each other. Okay, so figure out what that system is going to be and execute it. All right, and you can't do everything. Right? Don't be that boss that tries to do everything and never delegates anything out. That's a whole other conversation in itself. But anyway, I'm going to stop. I think I'm way over my time, probably. Close. Close. Anyway, we have Q&A time now. I know Aaron's got a ton. It's pretty much what he does every day. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So, we can.
Just a quick point of reference here. Our session is a little shorter than the one in the morning, and recognizing that you guys have a lot of questions already, we'd like to move into that right now to make sure that there's ample time for you to have a conversation with our two speakers. And so we're sort of we'll move on this on the fly here to see if we have sufficient time to break out a little bit as well. But we want to make sure that they have the chance to answer some of your questions. You guys can go ahead. I'll let you go.
I'm interested in the program, for instance, that you started at Michigan working with the prison systems, and how you were able, is that program still in existence with the University of Michigan? And if you have any advice for those of us who are starting volunteer programs at universities that we hope to graduate from and leave, but want to see our programs persist?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's still around, but it's sort of a shadow of what it was. As I said before, I think it's really critical to create the kind of advisory board around it. and include some faculty and some other people who are part of it, so that are going to be there past you, but to also really make sure that you bring them along for the whole ride, and they understand the vision, they understand the culture of what you're doing, they understand how you define success, and then also try to make sure you identify 3 or 4 key people that are several years behind you, that are sort of ready to take it on, and they have at least a year working with you to really sort of drink the Kool-Aid, as I said. Yes.
So I'd really like to learn more about your experience making decisions with organizational development. Because I think one of the hardest things is when you're working with volunteers, you have a student organization, you want to double the impact that you had the year before. Yep. My understanding of organizational development is that there's about 1,000 theories about how organizations evolve, and you basically pick one and try to go with it. So to me, that was like very challenging when I was leading an organization, and I guess I was wondering since both of you had very successful growth, what thought process did you go through? What assessments did you make about your organization when you were trying to decide how am I going to go from, I went from 600 to 8,000. How am I going to go from 8,000 to 12,000?
I think one of the best things that we did at the end of last year, you have success, and then people say, oh, you guys should get into this as well. You make good widgets, you should get into kitchen knives, and you should also get into widget accessories, and then people want you to branch out and do more things. Keep it simple and stay on your original path, and don't dilute the brand too much. So once you stay on that path and you figure out ways to be more effective through the operation of what you're doing, as a management team you become more efficient, and then that allows you more knowledge on how to get more volunteers involved. I think how to expand volunteer management. I might be getting off track, but does that make sense? Like stay on your original pattern.
I think organizational development overall, until you're a certain size, to me is not even the right place to be looking. I think it's team dynamics and how to set that up. I think trying to understand that dynamic, and then also, one of the things I learned really early on was that generally when you're trying to do something, you're trying to prove something's possible, and to be very clear about what assumptions, and this goes to that's when, what assumptions are you making about what's possible that other people don't think is possible, right? Put those down on paper and be very focused in on working to prove them. Treat it like a 11th grade chemistry class where you've got your hypothesis, your assumptions, and then you're sort of working to prove it out. Your ongoing legacy and your ability to have something you can carry on has a lot to do with just proving those things, and you can get very easily distracted trying to do a lot of other stuff. And you guys are trying to prove that veterans could provide critical, highly leveraged service outside of a war zone, right?
Yeah, and that veterans can act as leaders in their community.
Yeah.
One thing, so running a student organization, you guys talked about there being a lot of turnover, and thinking about the turnover, we have a little bit of turnover in our organization as well. And it was effective that we just, whoever's in that role now, develop a job description for what they're doing. So if that person has a job description, whoever steps back into that role can just follow on the job description and they'll learn on their own. It sounds simple, but having a template to roll from is a huge benefit to keep that consistency. Did that answer your question?
Way back.
Oh.
My name is Lisa Garcia. I come from Kosovo, Southeast Europe, and my question is basically I lead a team of 20 people that are in 20 different countries currently, and you really have a hard time of knowing what they're up to or what mood they are because they are 20 different time zones. And when we sat in the meeting, I don't know if somebody's hungry or if somebody's pissed off mood, but I lead them on a way that trying to get to work on an organizational way. All are from Kosovo, but we are in different countries, and we're all trying to make the way back home to sort of bring that impact to what we're learning abroad. But it's so hard to to work with all those people because most of them are of age 25 and up, and I'm the youngest person, and I was chosen to lead the team. And I'm having a hard time of understanding the age gap, because what I'm thinking, I'm sort of like passionate about what I do, and there's a take of my thinking. But then the other people are, another stage level of their life. So how do I sort of transmit that positivity, trying to keep the people that are in my team sort of in the same path, or trying to bring that strength in the organization? I don't know if it was clear.
Have you ever had a meeting with everybody in the same place?
No, I mean, we meet every year, we have a congress every year in the summer, but most of our work is online.
We work the same way. We have a leadership meeting every year. We try to do it twice a year, but to get everyone in the same place, and the focus of that 3 or 4 day meeting is just to get everyone on the same page. And then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's how it works for us. We have a meeting, get everyone on the same page, and we just communicate on a fairly regular basis. But the difference is for us is that we have 20 different people, but there are 4 different disciplines that each of those people fall under. So there's a director of personnel, there's a director of field operations, and maybe 10 people fall underneath each of those categories. So they're getting information from someone that's in charge of, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
And
that's
how do you make that the age gap work, because they won't necessarily think, oh, you're just because he's a young person so passionate about what you do.
We haven't had a problem with too many age gaps, and that's the benefit of using military veterans. But I mean, when I was talking about that, a lot of us are on the same page because of our training experience in the military, so people sort of fall into this pattern of thought. But I can't really, I don't know if you have any experience with that.
It's, what you're dealing with is incredibly hard, so congratulations that just even every day you survive, like.
That's a little chest pain.
I don't know that I don't have a lot of advice without being able to ask you 30 different questions about the circumstance, but which you don't have time to do here. I would say if people are very clear about their role, very clear about their goals, and they have a transparency where the whole group can see what everyone's doing, and everyone is accountable to everyone else, not just for you, that makes a huge difference. So you're not a hub and spoke, but instead a network. And the second thing is, I mean, I have offices across 5 cities and partners around the world, and sometimes it's just as simple as texting them and just sort of asking how their weekend was. And I'm a natural introvert, so I don't do that naturally. So sometimes what I do is even just have that as a system for myself to remind me, on Monday, these 5 people I should reach out to, on Tuesday, these people, and it's not a lack of sincerity, it's just, I'll forget. And just ask them, like, what's going on, how's your kid, how, what are you up to? Makes a huge difference, and you start to get to know that stuff. So that stuff, you do one of those a week with folks, and it carries you through to the next week.
Phone call goes a long way.
Yeah, sir.
My name's Ryan Fuller. My question is more for Matt. I'm remaining veteran myself. So much of my leadership style reflects military training. I wonder, have you had to adapt that at all working with civilians now, or how do you
Absolutely.
that environment?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be a little nicer. You can't just yell at someone, hey, you, get your shit, get out, start knife handing people on. Yeah, it's all, I think, through the process of just working with people and developing your leadership style, being a little more considerate of where people come from, how people respond to you asking them to do things, but also having an organization, where people want to do things. And if you have someone in your organization they don't want to work for you, there's a problem. You need to find out what the problem is, what the disconnect is, and either fix it or remove them from the organization. And that's one thing I really did talk about in volunteer organizations. It's okay to fire people from volunteer organizations. If you have somebody in your organization that's causing problems, have a policy, talk to an attorney, have a policy about removing volunteers. But we had to fire a few people last year, right? And that happens.
Send them to the brig.
Send them to the brig, right in there, the alligators. But yeah, so I know it really doesn't answer your question too much, but it's more an individual leadership style. Just be aware that the civilian world is a little bit different than the military world. And take into consideration, you know what I mean? Like asking people to do things not necessarily.
So building off of that, I was actually once on a aircraft carrier. That's about it. But, yeah, the Intrepid. That was cool though. I would never live on it, but the thing I think is really important for all of you to know, if you're working, how many of you are working with volunteers in some way? I think most of you. I'm actually working on a book right now about the fundamental shift in our economy, out of the information economy into the purpose economy, and sort of seeing the GDP overall starting to shift. Where purpose and the creation of purpose is going to be the #1 driver of our economy. And what's interesting when I've studied purpose, the concept is that people really get purpose from 3 things, and these are the 3 things that are the payment for volunteers. So I think it's really important to note there. #1 is the ability to have an impact. If people know they made an impact, it gives them purpose. serving others, getting something done, fundamentally having an impact. Number 2 is self-expression. Being able to express yourself. And that's one of the things volunteers, often to the annoyance of volunteer managers, love to express themselves a lot. They have a lot of opinions, they have a lot of things that they want to communicate. But you have to, instead of seeing that as a negative, see that as part of their payment, as they want to be able to express themselves. And the third is community. People want to be part of a community. So I think it's important to constantly look at your payroll each week for these folks and see what impact, ability to self-expression, and community you gave them that week, because that's ultimately their payment. And I think, coming from a military background or what have you, like if you think about it, you have no you have no control over these people. And if they quit, you can't throw them the break for going AWOL, right? Like you can't do that. So you need to think about what's going to motivate them. And you've got to deliver those 3 things, very, very routinely. Yeah, in the middle. Yes, you.
Well, my commitment is working with environmental awareness and I want to create mentorship program between college students and high school students and possibly younger students there in my local community, which is Twin Cities in Minnesota.
Yep.
Maybe I read the title wrong, but it's basically just me right now, so I need to build my team.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering what advice do you have for somebody who's just starting out and needs to build a base within the local community as well as at my university?
The best thing, what I did, I don't want to hear advice to be honest, but when I was starting Taproot, I reached out to some degree to friends, but probably less so. What I ended up doing was writing job descriptions for what I needed to be done. So I needed a vice president of marketing, I needed a vice president of technology, et cetera, and I posted them on Craigslist as volunteer jobs. And said, need someone to do 10 hours a week doing the job, here's the job description, and then interviewed people who wanted to volunteer to do them. And found that I got people who I just never in my wildest dreams would have thought would have applied, and actually had an embarrassment. So I would be audacious, be clear about what you want, write a job description for what you need, and treat it like you're hiring, and post it on Craigslist or on LinkedIn or on Idealist or whatever the right place is. You'll be surprised often what turns up.
Does that work when you're looking for undergraduates, or you are an undergraduate?
If you project confidence, I think it would work for a 5-year-old. My daughter can get anybody to do anything. I get lots to do with attitude. There's 70-year-olds who couldn't pull it off, and there are 5-year-olds who could. So you've got to just have the attitude of saying, what I'm doing is important. If this doesn't happen, it's going to have a negative implication on our community, and therefore, I want you to follow it.
I think to add to that, if you get the right people in the room, the right people to show up for an interview, if you have a plan going into it, then people will want to be part of it. If you show up without a plan, you're like, hey, we just figured we're going to do this, we're going to go take over the world. And what do you think? We got a case of beer. Have a plan.
That changed with the beer, though.
Yeah, I'm totally in. But if you have that plan, if you develop the job descriptions, then people are more apt to be part of it. Unless it's such a harebrained idea like Team Rubicon, where we just kind of showed up and then developed the positions as we needed them, which is not the most effective way to do it, I think. Like Aaron's approach to it a lot. None of us have a business background. We were all just sort of a bunch of soldiers, so we just started messing around with stuff. But I think that's the key to get people to stay, get people who want to be there.
Can you talk more about the concept of having a personal board of directors? What that was like?
No. No, I think it goes to understanding. First it starts with something you said about self-awareness, right? And understanding that you've got blind spots, and that are both in terms of what your strengths are, but also your network, right? There's people you naturally gravitate to, there's people you know. To be successful, you need to have a broad network, and you need to have people who can complement your blind spots, right? So it's thinking about people who are just fans of yours. And your mom could be on your board. It's not that's fine. It's not like you have them meet. I'm not talking about having your personal board meeting. I'm talking about the fact that you've got folks that you can call on, and you cultivate them regularly, and you're constantly asking them for advice and for help with things that you're doing. and looking for people who know how to do things you don't know how to do, and that you want to learn. This also goes to your colleague's question. I don't know if it's true like early 20-something, but once you get to people who are 30 or over in general, one of the things they love to do is being told that they're smart and have interesting and important information to share. And they love mentoring. They just love the idea of mentoring people. So they're going to get a kick out of helping you, and you think you're sort of a burden to them or silly. You don't know how much of an ego boost it is for them. So don't underestimate how much, whether it's for your personal board of advisors or bring people into your organization, how much of a kick they're going to get out of it. When they go back to cocktail parties and talk to people, they're like, I'm working with this cool student doing this awesome stuff. It makes them seem so cool and so with it. Like you don't know how much of an asset you're giving to them. So don't be shy. I'm very serious about that. Haven't gone over here for a while. Yeah.
I don't know if you talked about this, but I just wanted to find out how you keep your volunteers motivated. Because how to keep them motivated, how to ensure retention. Like if someone has been working on you with the program for like 2 years, do you promote them to a more permanent position? And do you need to start paying them? Like what do you do to actually keep people interested?
How do you keep people motivated over time? Like, fine the first couple of times you do something, but it's year 2. How do you keep them motivated?
Screwed up. I mean, other than showing progress, which is probably the best way, have manageable goals. I mean, if you start with smaller, more attainable goals, then you'll actually be able to show progress, which will then, I think, encourage people to stay in love with you more as well. I mean, you can incentivize things, in your own organizations, however you see fit. Have money, pay people money if you'd like to, or incentivize it some other way. I didn't get paid for the first 2 years. I did Team Rubicon. I just did it because I believed in it, as well as the rest of us. So no one got paid because they did it full time. So if you can find people that believe in your organization that much, that are willing to work for free, that can be total suckers like myself, then that's awesome. But I think it just depends on your organization, what you're able to incentivize it with, and if you have those attainable goals.
Now let's go back to the impact, expression, and community. Like those are the things that keep them. And I'd also I think running Matt's comment earlier, just ask them. Like each person has a different answer to that question. I found some people, they want to become a spokesperson, so they go from doing the service to being an evangelist who goes out and recruits people and tells the story, maybe talks to the media, and they get a kick out of that. Some people just want to do more of the same, and they're just happy doing what they're doing. Some people want to manage other folks. I mean, there's so many different motivations, and for one person, you might assume they'd love to go out and do public speaking, but that might be the biggest demotion in the world to them because they hate doing it. So I think it's really important to just ask them. Yeah.
So our team's commitment is to establish a global forum that brings together young people from Arctic states to work on environmental and social challenges in the Arctic. And so it's going to be organized by partner organizations from all these countries like Canada, US, Norway, Russia, so many different countries. How do you, what kind of organizational model would you take for that? If we're going to work together, there isn't one organization on the top, we're all kind of partners in organizing. How would you?
Quick question: what do you mean by young people?
So under 30.
Sorry. One quick thing is.
Does that mean I'm old?
You already established that. One quick thing before I try to answer your question. I'm afraid it's similar to your colleague question. You guys should be careful about letting people label you as young people. I think it's patronizing. You guys are doing more important stuff in many cases than people that are in their 40s and 50s and doing it smarter and with more passion. So sometimes it's important. Sometimes it's helpful for fundraising to call yourself a young person, but I really strongly urge you guys to not classify yourselves that way. You guys are social entrepreneurs. Doesn't matter how old you are. Demand the respect. Don't let people label you that way. That aside, that's my soapbox.
The reason why I brought that up is because it'd be called the Youth Arctic Council because there's a real Arctic Council of high-level decision makers, and we'd be affiliated to them. But we're the youth body for it. So.
Yeah, I just you're gonna get a soapbox from me on this one. Unfortunately, I think that whole model is dysfunctional. I think it's fundamentally segregating the real leaders from you kids. It's like the kids' table at dinner. And I think in many cases you guys have more relevant, more important things to say about the issue than these other folks do. And I think if you want, like, you wouldn't say like you're gonna have like the whiteboard and the blackboard, right? Like it's just this kind of segregation just doesn't make any sense to me. I understand the need for like, how do you actually bring youth, as you're describing it, it's so.
Yeah, like, in terms, there's too much bureaucracy in getting like youth delegates in the Arctic Council at this point, so that's why we're pursuing.
I understand, and sometimes you have to make compromise. That's just one of my biggest pet peeves is these junior boards. And
I don't prefer this either.
Yeah, no, I get it. Why don't we chat?
Okay.
So your question's complicated enough that let's talk about it afterwards so I can actually help you more. You're probably right next to you, so I was.
So speaking of bureaucracy, I'm working on a mentorship program between college students and high school students, and we've recently grown a lot, and all our volunteers are college-aged, so who have graduated from high school in the past 4 years, mentoring students from the high school that they graduated from.
Yep.
And as we're growing, we're seeing like a lot more bureaucratic structure, and I'm wondering, how do you keep an organization open, and how do you keep leaders accountable when your volunteers are like all across these different schools and from all different socioeconomic backgrounds? You're growing really quickly, and how do you keep that openness?
I think that it's hard to run these chapter organizations, or even if one person is a chapter, you still have to have the mothership to lay down policy, keep a consistent message, sort of what we were talking about earlier, and then hopefully you have enough people with you on the mothership team, or the headquarters team, to go out and talk to these people. There's nothing like a face-to-face meeting with someone else, and you know, whether they're in your organization or you're thinking about bringing this person into your organization, hopefully you can have a face-to-face with this person before you bring them in, because there's a lot of crazy people out there. That being said, I would suggest having some sort of core cadre with wherever the bulk of the information is going to come from, or whoever is going to be directing the organization, and then have a team of people that are capable of either going to these organizations or people that can come to you on a fairly regular basis, or just, does that make sense?
So one of my favorite quotes, I think it was John Gardner, said, the last act of a dying organization is to update the policy book, right? Which I think sort of speaks to that bureaucracy, and sort of that starts to calcify. What I find is it's really important to shock the system every once in a while and like do something unexpected and to like, turn some things upside down, just so that people don't get too accustomed to any kind of status quo. I'm not talking about hurting anybody, but just like doing some stuff that's unexpected. The other exercise, I started having that happen as well, and I was getting frustrated as well, because people were saying in my name, like, Aaron wouldn't want that. Aaron wouldn't allow that. I'm like, the hell I wouldn't. Like people had like got it in their head that like I represented like this bureaucracy and this like way of doing stuff. So we went through and we said, what were all the assumptions we made in designing our program that had become this wild success, right? And we wrote down, there were like 30 assumptions we had made when we had designed it. We found that we could only, this was about 7 years later, we could only definitively say that 4 of those were right. The rest of them were either wrong or we weren't sure. So we said, how can we sit here and say that like it has to be done a certain way? When we may have only gotten 4 out of 30 things right, we still were successful. Which just got people into a culture of saying, one, you don't have to have everything perfect, but also whatever we're doing right now is probably more wrong than right, and there's always room for change. And building a culture where you're constantly questioning those assumptions, because assumptions are the death of an organization.
That's why it's important to have that two-way communication between people that are out, working in the organization alike. But the sky is blue. And you're like, no, the policy says the sky is red. But over here in Kansas, the sky is blue, and then there are a lot of different things to take into consideration for different people's place of businesses.
So speaking of blind spots, is there anyone here who feels like you've been raising your hand a lot, I just haven't been seeing you? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been running my own organization for a while, and I'm all about like just independence, and like what you said about
how long is a while?
Not doing 2 years now. Yeah. It's been growing slow, but now it's getting to the point where the infrastructure is growing. People are requesting in new cities, and I'm kind of being removed to like, I don't know, more administrative level. And I'm getting a lot of volunteers, but I find that the work they do, I'm displeased with, and I find myself like I can go back over it and redo it myself. And so I feel like I'm essentially like breaking down all these things you say with like incentivize volunteers, but I'm trying to figure out how, at what point do you make a sacrifice of your integrity of I don't know.
Did you screen the volunteers up front to see if they're capable of doing the projects you've got them doing?
Yeah, I do it. I'm trying to monitor what they're doing. I also hear from the organizations that I work with that they're, incentive. Well, I also go to like very liberal schools. A lot of people, I'm doing very sensitive subject matter, so a lot of these people come in with preconceptions and kind of muddle the plot that I've been like delicately working with. And I find myself like freaking out and just trying to do it all myself, and it's become like an issue that I drop the ball all over the place.
You need to have those mid-level managers or mid-level people in the organization that can go out and do this work for you, because you'll drive. I mean, it sounds like you're already at the place where you're driving yourself crazy. You can't do everything. You can't be everywhere at once. Like, you have to build the culture of the organization. Like we were talking about, like Aaron was talking about, not what Aaron wants, but what the organization, is. What is your organization? And then be able to translate that out to the people in your organization so that they know what your intent is. And it's not always easy to get that intent across, but you have to figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, I think you got to figure out, is it a need for middle management and like better structure, or do you need more self-awareness yourself as a leader about why you're not happy with what they're producing, or why you're either bringing the right people in, providing the right training, or trusting them, which is a hard thing. And I find that I do that. I still have a few things where I micromanage, just because they're like my ability skill, but it takes a lot of self-awareness.
Maybe, one last thing. Maybe your pattern's too broad too. Maybe you're dealing with too many different topics. So just something else to take into consideration. If you're dealing with everything from clean water to teen pregnancy, then maybe like narrow the shot.
I think it's actually quite the opposite next to the problem. But I think there's a big thing about trust, and I don't really know specifically what I want these people to be doing with the people. I just know how I've done it in the past.
Right, and that's one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur, trying to figure out things that are intuitive for you and turn that into processes. So give yourself a break on that to know that's really, really hard, and find someone as a partner who can extract that from you and help document it. Because you probably can't do it yourself. It's too intuitive. That's why they say in like baseball, the best hitters are terrible batting coaches because it's so easy for them. You need the people who struggle and figure it out to like help it. My politician friend here.
Okay.
Yeah.
First thing I want to say is a very interesting point you brought us, bringing your mom onto the board. Being Jewish, having a Jewish mother, not the best idea. Too much guilt, too much nagging, and they just quit. But really, what I wanted to ask you was, you're writing a book about shifting to a purpose-based economy.
Yeah.
I've been reading up a lot on conscious capitalism from John Mackey, founder of Whole Foods. Been reading up on RI, double and triple bottom line.
Yeah.
How are we able to, because we have the financial metrics to measure what an adequate return is. How do we measure what an adequate return is from a social standpoint, through maybe a financial lens or through other lenses? Maybe you talking about that in your book, or do you have any insight at the moment about that?
So it's a broad topic. I think it's. I think there is the opportunity to have just as powerful a returns with purpose-based business as there is with any other business. So I don't actually believe that we should have a double standard on it. I think the bigger issue is fundamentally that we've created a system economically where the true cost of some of these companies that are not doing double bottom line or triple bottom line thinking are de facto being subsidized and help to be counter-competitive. So a longer point, but I think it's actually, I would go to a different entry point and looking at that issue rather than looking at the ROI question. I think it's the actual, the structure that makes the other ones able to succeed when they're not truly returning that without huge cost to society. Who are we neglecting? The gentleman back there, yeah, he looks neglected. Yes, sorry. You had a look in your eye like you were hungry for an answer. Yes.
Hi, so we've been talking about building your team a lot, and I think it's really important to have a manageable and sustainable size of your organization sometimes. And in some cases, you need to cut down people or resources. So I was wondering if there's any precautions or strategies that you might want to know when you have to cut down some people or to say things for no things.
You mean having the wrong person in the role, or just having too many people in your leadership team?
In both cases, probably. But when you have too many people, you can't really control. And if you have a problem with your resources, you need to cut down some people. Would it be a good way to set people up?
It's so circumstantial.
Yeah. No,
I mean, I'll get back to you. It's integrity, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the more you can upfront talk to people about it, the better.
You have to have those real conversations. People are like, look, we made $1 million last year, we made $500,000 this year. There's not enough money in the budget, so we're gonna figure out what the plan is. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. Just tell people what the situation is. And to the other point, if you've got more bosses than employees, then maybe it's time to start looking at the model.
This is the National Association of Bosses.
Oh, well, that'd be good.
There's actually a place in DC called the Association for Association Professionals. It's like the best organization ever. So we have a couple more minutes. I want to do a fast quiz at the end, but there's a little cluster here. Let's just quickly. Do you just say all three questions and we'll answer them together? So if you guys, first question.
It's close to letting people go and stuff because about 6 months ago I began an organization and I had a bunch of people. I think the biggest mistake was I applied for the whole organization even kicked out. So there's a bunch of money came in, and on the line I the money situation, and I called them to just do an organization. I called them with my faculty advisor and let people go. Now there was backlash. People started crying, comments started going on, and it was like hating me. All of a sudden, and then people were like, don't go, like, let you go. He's gonna use you, let you go. You know, and so.
There's always going to be haters. That's not even bullshit. Like, there's always going to be somebody out there who doesn't like you. If you're a boss and everybody loves you, you're doing something wrong. Like you got to be a boss. You're not there. You're not there to make friends. You're not there to hang out and have cocktails, even though sometimes you do that. And you got to be the guy in charge. And that's why
we broke with that process, but yes, I think that's exactly right. And I find a good boss or manager is respected, but not necessarily liked.
My question kind of goes back to Michael's point a little bit. It's about building a team. I'm talking about practice time. So in undergrad, I created a organization that goes to crisis that completely understand it. I'm still building it. And throughout the process, I know I was upset and I didn't handle it the right way. And now that I'm a little older, I can look back at my mistakes, how I handled it. I would wish people that handle it differently. But let's say you have a crisis that is a brand new organization. How do you handle it with your team? How do you guys stay together, even if John or everybody else?
And the last question, sir, I respond. Yeah.
Simple and clear. I'm about to graduate.
Congratulations.
And I want to make sure that the organization that I started has a clear transaction before giving me questions.
Yeah.
How would you do it?
Clear but not simple. So the crisis, I mean, a lot of these questions are so situational. I found when there's crisis in the work I do, it's don't try to protect your staff, your team. Be transparent about what's you also try to patronize your staff and try to protect them from what's going on. Not a good idea. What you want to do is let them know what's going on, let them know what you're facing. They're going to think it's worse. They're going to always think it's 10 times worse than it actually is. So if you can let them know what's actually going on, they're going to be anchored in reality versus in their what they're projecting onto it. Like, be real, tell them what's going on, get their input, let them know when you're going to get back, when you're going to make decisions, what you're doing. Just be real with them. It takes a lot of the drama out, which helps maintain the organization.
That's what I think he wasn't saying don't protect them, but like don't sugarcoat it. Don't like try to tell them like okay. But I mean, obviously you want to take care of the secret. If somebody's jammed up, you want to defend the people. But is that what you're saying? Like don't.
The two things happen, and this goes to the other question too. People think that leaders of organizations have superpowers. It's part of the mythology of our culture. So they're going to think that you somehow can take care of any problem, and that's not healthy for you or them. The second thing, real quick diversion. I took my daughter to a play a couple years ago. She was like 5, and we were walking by a store, and there were mannequins in the window. She said, "Daddy, how do they make mannequins?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, what do you think?" She's like, "They take people, they kill them, they chop off their head, and they cover them in nail polish."
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, that's dark, right? But that's like what a lot of people I find on my team, like if you don't tell them what's going on, they assume something much worse is actually going on in reality. So like, just remember that. Let's talk afterwards. Yours is complicated. So a quick quiz. First person, who can name the 3 things that are from the Army Rangers Field Manual? You know do? All right. The first winner of a copy of my book, Powered by Pro Bono. Who can remember the 3 things that cause create purpose? Raise your hand, I'll shout out. Right here.
Impact.
Yep. Behind you, sorry.
There it is.